Welcome back. How'd you enjoy that last chapter? Hopefully you have a full understanding now of the difference between real and personal property as we move forward. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about interest and estates and the difference between the two. So you learned in the last section about rights, what you have the right to and what you would actually own, what becomes your real property whenever you buy a piece of land. But now we're going to start getting into some of the different rights and ownership interest. Remember we said before that I can have a right to something, not necessarily own it? Well, now we're going to start getting into different types of ownership and the rights associated with different types of ownership and just different types of interest in property. So let's imagine you're renting a house. If you rent a house or a tenant, do you own that property? No, but you have a right to it, right? So, we're going to get into a little bit more about rights and interest in property. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now remember, all of these sessions are going to build on each other because we said we're laying the foundation of your future career. This may be one that you want to revisit later because all the concepts and terminology are really important. So like I said, we're going to give you a brief overview and then you're going to have to really dig in and make sure that you're remembering the bullet points under each important concept. And I'll give you a couple of examples as we go through the work today. So buckle your seatbelts and let's dive in. All right, so first word, interests. The interest in property. Those can be ownership or a claim on any of the bundle of rights. You're going to read about the bundle of rights. Back in the old days, I heard this story. It really made sense to me. The bundle of rights includes different rights like use, ownership, the right to will that property to somebody else, the right to lease it, to mortgage it, the right to, dig a garden, different things that are included in what they call the bundle of rights. But if you look back at the history, it was a common custom that if I gave you or sold to you a piece of property, I would go through the yard and pick up sticks out of the yard, tie those up in a bundle, and the ceremonious thing nowadays is we sit in the closing attorney's table or we sign paperwork to transfer ownership. But old common custom was that I would gather up a ceremonious bundle of sticks and flowers out of the yard, tie them up, and I would pass them over to you as the new owner as a ceremonious way of me saying, these aren't my sticks anymore, now they're yours and the land is yours. So if you can imagine each individual stick in that bundle labeled with one of the things in the bundle of rights you're going to learn about, like the right to use, possess. All of those different sticks in the bundle are rights in that property. So just like we have to know the physical aspects of the property we're selling and what we're getting whenever we buy property, we also have to know what rights we have in the property and what we're passing on to somebody else or possibly even retaining for myself. Remember I mentioned the pond that I have? Maybe I'm going to sell the property. But whenever I give you that sticks, when I give you that bundle of sticks, maybe I want to retain the right to be able to come back and fish in my pond whenever I want to. Can I do that? Yeah, you would have to agree to it and you would know up front that that's happening. But if I retain the stick out of my bundle that I have a permanent use or easement to be able to come back and use that pond, you know that you're only getting certain sticks. So could you give somebody else permanent use of my pond? No, because you don't have that stick. So remember that there's different rights and interests associated with the ownership and transfer of property. You have to understand what you're getting, and the buyers and sellers have to know what they're passing off and what they retain. I've actually had sellers sell a property and come back and say, well, I went to my house yesterday because I realized I left some stuff in the attic and they wouldn't let me in. Well, they don't have to. It's not your property anymore. You gave all those sticks. You didn't retain the right to have access to the attic. So we have to remember that whenever we transfer property, those rights and interests transfer also, but there are certain ways we can retain some of them. So that's going to make more sense as you dive into the material. But overall interest are an ownership or claim to any of the bundle of rights. Estates and land. Estates include the right of possession, leaseholds, freeholds, but an estate and land. A lot of times if you ride through different communities, you'll see like the estate section. You know, we have an estates at Jones Creek. There's regular Jones Creek, then there's the estates at Jones Creek. In common terminology, we think that the estate is the bigger piece of property. Right? Well, it's not a matter of the quantity or the quantity of the property, but the actual quality of the interest. So if I have an estate in a piece of real property, it really just means that I have an interest in that property itself. And again, you'll dive a little bit deeper. So, different terminology you've probably never heard before, freehold estates. Freehold estate. It just means I have an ownership interest. Freehold. I'm free to hold it, if that helps. Don't know why they call it that, but it's a term and you need to make sure you remember it. So a freehold estate is an estate of ownership interest. We're going to take a really deep dive into different types of ownerships in further chapters, but for now, a couple of them that are important. Whenever you see fee simple absolute is the highest and best type of ownership you can have. A fee estate is one that I hold such a high amount of interest in that property that I can even will it to my children. So not even my life is going to end my interest in that property. That's a pretty big deal, right? So a fee simple absolute is the highest and best form of ownership that we have, and a fee estate means that I can even pass it on to heirs if I want to. There are things that you're going to hear about like defeasible. Think about defeasible as that can be defeated. So I could have a defeasible fee estate, which means I could still pass it on to my children, but when I have ownership of that property, there could be something else that could defeat my ownership or make it end prematurely. And again, we're going to look a little bit deeper. Life estate. Life estate is a concept that people always have a huge issue with, but I can guarantee you're going to see this concept again between now and your examinations, and especially your state exam. So let's camp out for a second. My father had Alzheimer's, and towards the end of his life, he needed to be taken care of, but we didn't really want to put him in full-time like care facility. So I'll make up a little bit of a story. Imagine we bought a house, and maybe I don't like Uncle Jack too much, but I really love my dad. So maybe I bought this property and made Uncle Jack the life tenant, but it's not just for him. Remember we said the fee estates, we can have so much interest that we pass them on to somebody else. A life estate is completely set aside, but that life tenant can't pass it on to their heirs. That life tenant only has that property for the duration of their life. So if they pass away, it would either revert back to the original owner or someone else named, which they call a remainder man. So I could say, okay, Uncle Jack, you can have the property for as long as you're alive, but whenever you pass away, it'll come back to me, or when you pass away, it's going to go to maybe my son Brandon. Or since we're worried about Dad, like I said, don't really like Uncle Jack too much, but he'll take care of Dad. So a life estate per attrivee is another life estate, but not based on the life of the life tenant. It's based on someone else's life. So now, who do you think would have to pass away for me to get that property back? Not Uncle Jack, because now it's based on Dad's life. Hope that helps that concept make sense a little bit when you dive deeper into it, because it can be really confusing, and people say, well, why would I sell a property to somebody if they're only going to have it until they die? Well, all the concepts in real estate, why would we do any of them? Well, there's different purposes for owning real estate. It's not always about just living there and raising grandbabies. Sometimes it's for investment property. Sometimes it is to take care of someone else. Sometimes it's for a business venture. So open your mind to the different possibilities and the different things that could be involved in your ownership of real estate. Think outside the box a little bit and just be open to new concepts. I know it's complicated, but don't try to figure out so much the why would you do it. Just remember the what. Life estates would end with someone's life, either that life tenant or the life of someone else, if it's a life estate per attrivee. And with a life estate, there's always going to be either a reversionary interest to the original owner, grantor, or a remainderment interest to someone else named. Remember I talked about the concepts, that you need to learn the concepts? There's a list of concepts for life tenant. So whenever you come across these different concepts, make sure that you're knowing the different things involved in that concept of ownership in general. All right. Also, we're going to get into a little bit of leases and leasehold estates. So we've talked about my teacup several times, but if you're a tenant in a property, remember you do have rights, you do have interest in the property, but you don't own it. So if I have the property, I have what's called a possessory estate. I possess it, pretty easy, just like my coffee cup. Now, if I let my cohort that you guys can't see, if I let Chloe have a sip out of my tea, is that still my tea? She's not keeping it. I'm not giving it away. Don't get too excited. So I'm not giving it away. I still own the property, but right now, let's get ready for this terminology. I have a future non-possessory reversionary estate in my teacup. How you like those 25-cent words? You're going to learn a whole lot more of them in this chapter, but just remember there's possessory estates, there's non-possessory estate. Just means I've temporarily or permanently given up the ability to actually be there, hold it of my own. And remember just to differentiate the different types of interest, the different level of interest you can have in a property. And again, open your mind up, because we always think that real estate is just, I bought it, it's mine, I'm the only one that can make money off of it. Get that out of your head and absorb the concepts, because remember, we're laying a foundation. It's a really important one. So as you move into the different types of ownerships and interest and the different leaseholds, make sure that you're remembering the different key points for each concept. Hope that helps as you get ready to dive into session 3.